The emergency lights in the council chamber cast red shadows across Ambassador Helen Carter's face as she read the classified message on her personal tablet, her expression carefully neutral despite the ice forming in her stomach. The message from Earth Command was brief but terrifying. Fleet movements detected around all human colonies. Council vote tomorrow is trap. Maintain diplomatic stance at all costs. Around her, the massive amphitheater of Harmony Station buzzed with the usual pre-session chatter, but something felt different today. The alien delegates seemed too relaxed, too confident, sharing glances and subtle gestures that spoke of prior coordination. Helen had been a diplomat for 20 years and could read a room better than most. This room reeked of conspiracy. Captain David Ross sat 3 rows behind her in the military observer section, his weathered face betraying nothing as he scanned the assembled delegates through his enhanced vision implants. 40 years of service had taught him to spot ambush preparations, and every instinct screamed danger. The positioning was all wrong. Species that had been enemies for centuries now sat clustered together, their body language suggesting recent alliance. The Altarians and the Helix Consortium hadn't spoken in decades, yet their delegations kept exchanging meaningful looks. The session bells chimed across the station, their haunting melody designed to promote peace and contemplation. Helen found it deeply ironic as Ambassador Quileth of the Altarian Federation rose to address the assembly. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent blue skin and 4 arms. And right now those arms were gesturing in patterns that Helen recognized as barely contained excitement. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Quileth's voice carried perfectly through the chamber's acoustic design. Today we gather to address a matter of utmost importance to galactic stability and peace. The translation implants converted his clicks and whistles into perfectly understandable English, but Helen caught the subtle emphasis he placed on certain words, emphasis that suggested, "Rehearsal for 15 years. We have welcomed our human colleagues into our community of civilized worlds. We have shared our knowledge, our trade routes, our very homes with them." Quileth's 4 eyes swept across the chamber, lingering just a moment too long on the human delegation. "In that time, we have witnessed remarkable growth from our youngest member species." Helen felt her stomach tighten. The word growth carried implications in council speak that had nothing to do with population or economy. When Quileth said growth, he meant expansion, military expansion. However, and there it was, the word Helen had been dreading. Recent analysis by our collective security committees has revealed patterns of behavior that cause us deep concern. Behind Quileth, a massive holographic display materialized. Showing star maps and fleet movements, Helen recognized them immediately. They were tracking data of every human military vessel for the past 5 years. Captain Ross shifted slightly in his seat, his enhanced implants recording everything for later analysis. The display showed human patrol routes, defensive positions, even the locations of their newest military installations. What it didn't show was context, that most of these positions were responses to pirate activity or requests for assistance from council member worlds. Our human friends have increased their military capabilities by 400% since joining the council. Quileth continued, his voice taking on the tone of a disappointed parent. They have established military installations in 17 systems, deployed combat fleets to regions where no threats existed, and developed weapons technologies that far exceed their stated defensive needs. The chamber stirred with murmurs of concern, exactly as Quileth had intended. Helen glanced around and saw expressions of worry and suspicion on faces that had been friendly just yesterday. The masterful manipulation was working. Truth twisted just enough to become lie without technically being false. Furthermore, Quileth's secondary arms now gestured toward additional displays showing human trade vessels. Intelligence suggests that civilian human ships have been equipped with military-grade shielding and weapons systems under the guise of piracy protection. This represents a militarization of civilian space that violates the spirit, if not the letter of council accords. Helen's hands clenched beneath the table. Those civilian modifications had been approved by the council's own security committee after a series of brutal pirate attacks on human cargo vessels. But presented without context, they looked like preparation for war, Captain Ross was thinking. along similar lines, but his tactical mind was processing the implications differently. The aliens weren't wrong about human military expansion. They were just wrong about the reasons Helen was a diplomat. She saw deception, David was a soldier. He saw preparation. The council hadn't called this session to voice concerns. They had called it to justify what they had already decided to do. It is with heavy hearts that we must address this growing threat to galactic peace. Quileth continued, and now his voice carried the weight of predetermined judgment. The Weapons Reduction Protocol, as drafted by our Collective Security Committee and approved by preliminary vote of all non-human council members, is designed to ensure that no single species can threaten the stability we have worked so hard to achieve. The words hit Helen like a physical blow. Preliminary vote. That meant every alien species in the council had already agreed to whatever was coming next. The 30-day grace period she was about to request wouldn't be time to negotiate. It would be time to prepare for whatever punishment they had already decided upon. The protocol is simple in its requirements. Quileth's display shifted to show what looked like a legal document. But Helen could see it was actually a surrender demand. Humanity will reduce its military fleet by 90% within 100 standard days. All remaining vessels will be subject to ongoing inspection by Council security forces. All human worlds will accept permanent peacekeeping garrisons to ensure compliance with galactic peace accords. The chamber fell absolutely silent. The magnitude of what was being demanded was staggering. Not just disarmament, but occupation. Every human world would have alien military forces stationed on it permanently. The word peacekeeping couldn't disguise what this really was: conquest through bureaucracy. Additionally, Quileth wasn't finished. All human weapons research will be subject to council oversight. All military technologies developed since joining the council will be shared with the Collective Security Committee for evaluation. All human military personnel will undergo retraining in council-approved defensive doctrines only. Helen felt her diplomatic training taking over, suppressing the rage and fear that threatened to show on her face. They weren't just demanding disarmament. They were demanding the complete dismantling of human military capability and the surrender of every technological advantage humanity had developed. Captain Ross was counting alien fleet positions in his head. The timing wasn't coincidental. Several human fleets were currently engaged in anti-piracy operations at the galaxy's edge. Far from any human worlds, the remaining forces would be outnumbered by at least 50-1 if the Council decided to enforce their demands by force. We understand this may come as difficult news to our human colleagues, Quileth's tone suggested. Anything but understanding. Therefore, in accordance with Council traditions, we grant the standard diplomatic grace period of 30 standard days for consideration of these terms. After that time, failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression against the galactic community. Helen stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. Ambassador Quileth, the United Earth government respectfully requests the full 30-day consideration period as provided by Council Charter. Her voice carried no emotion, no hint of the storm brewing behind her diplomat's mask. We will need time to consult with our home government on matters of such significance. Of course. Quileth's response was gracious on the surface, but his 4 eyes glittered with satisfaction. The Council looks forward to humanity's wise decision in this matter. We are confident that our youngest members will recognize the necessity of these measures for the greater good. As the session adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Helen remained seated, her mind racing. The careful positioning of alien fleets around human colonies, the preliminary vote that excluded only humans, the timing that caught most of Earth's military scattered across the galaxy. This wasn't diplomacy. This was war by other means. Captain Ross approached her position, his expression grim. Ambassador, we need to establish secure communication with Earth immediately. His voice was pitched low enough that alien hearing wouldn't pick it up. I've identified at least 12 species that have never cooperated before working together on this. They're not just trying to disarm us. They're trying to eliminate us as a threat. Helen nodded, her diplomat's mind finally accepting what her gut had known from the moment she read that first message. 30 days, Captain. How long do you think it will take them to move their fleets into final position around our worlds? Based on the movements I've been tracking, Ross checked his tactical display discreetly. I'd say they'll be ready to enforce their demands in exactly 31 days. They're not planning to give us a choice. As they made their way toward the station's communication center, Helen couldn't shake the feeling that the Council had just made a terrible mistake. They saw humanity as a threat that needed to be neutralized. What they didn't realize was that trying to disarm Earth might just prove exactly how dangerous humans could be when cornered. The question that haunted her as they walked through Harmony Station's corridors wasn't whether humanity would survive the next 30 days. It was whether the Galactic Council would. The secure conference room beneath Geneva's mountains had been designed to survive nuclear war, but President Maria Santos wondered if it would survive what was coming next. The holographic displays surrounding the emergency session of the Terran Defense Council showed a galaxy in motion. Alien fleets repositioning like pieces on a vast chessboard, all converging on human space with mathematical precision. The intelligence Captain Ross gathered confirms our worst fears. General Patricia Hayes stood before the main display, her silver hair catching the blue light of the tactical projections. This isn't a diplomatic initiative gone wrong. This is a coordinated military campaign disguised as peacekeeping. Every major council species has been moving assets into position for at least 6 months. Dr. Michael Chang, head of the Special Projects Division, looked up from his tablet where he'd been running calculations. The timing isn't coincidental either. Our main battle fleets are scattered across 3 sectors dealing with those pirate attacks that now look suspiciously coordinated, to draw our forces away from Earth. President Santos felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. How bad is our strategic position, General? In conventional terms? Hayes manipulated the display to show force comparisons. We're looking at odds of roughly 1,000 to 1. The combined alien fleets outmass our entire navy by a factor that makes resistance seem impossible. Their technology in some areas matches or exceeds ours, and they have the advantage of unified command structure. The room fell silent except for the humming of quantum processors calculating probable outcomes. Admiral Lisa Stone, commander of the home fleet, was the first to speak. There has to be something we're missing. No species commits to this level of coordination without believing they can win quickly and decisively. What are they afraid of? Dr. Chang looked up from his calculations, his expression thoughtful. That's actually a very good question, Admiral. What makes 1,000 species unite against one that's been nothing but cooperative for 15 years? He gestured to his tablet. I've been analyzing their demands, and they're not asking for surrender. They're asking for something much more specific. Explain. President Santos leaned forward. They want our weapons research. They want our military technologies. They want access to our development programs. Chang's eyes lit up with the satisfaction of solving a puzzle. They're not afraid of our ships or our numbers. They're afraid of our innovation rate. We've advanced further in 15 years than most council species do in centuries. General Hayes frowned. But they have technologies we don't. Our quantum crystalline power systems, their faster-than-light communications, their gravity manipulation tech, all of which are based on principles they discovered thousands of years ago. Chang interrupted. When was the last time you heard of a major breakthrough from the Altarians? Or the Helix Consortium? They've been using the same basic technologies for millennia, just refining them slightly. The implications hit Admiral Stone first. They've stagnated. We haven't. Our rate of innovation scares them more than our current capabilities. President Santos felt pieces clicking into place, which means they believe we'll eventually surpass them completely if given enough time, so they're acting now, while they still have overwhelming numerical superiority. Exactly. Chang pulled up a new display showing technological development curves. But here's what they don't know. We've already made breakthroughs they can't imagine. I've been running a classified program for 3 years, ever since our intelligence services first detected unusual alien fleet movements. The display shifted to show what looked like theoretical physics equations mixed with engineering schematics. President Santos recognized some of the quantum mechanics. but the practical applications were beyond her. Dr. Chang, please tell me you haven't been developing planet-killer weapons in my basement. Nothing like that, Madam President. Chang's smile was enigmatic. Something much more elegant. We've been studying the fundamental principles behind alien technology, particularly their quantum crystalline systems. Everything from their computers to their life support to their weapons relies on quantum crystalline matrices. General Hayes leaned forward. And we've learned how to disrupt them selectively and temporarily, and from a distance. Chang's expression grew serious. More importantly, we've learned to harden our own systems against the same disruption. The modifications are already being installed on every human vessel under the guise of routine maintenance. The room erupted in questions, but Admiral Stone's tactical mind cut through the noise. Dr. Chang, are you telling us we can disable alien technology while keeping our own operational? For approximately 30 hours, yes. The disruption field requires enormous amounts of energy to maintain, and the aliens will eventually adapt their systems. But 30 hours of having them helpless while we remain fully functional? Chang shrugged. That should be sufficient to make our point. President Santos felt hope stirring for the first time since receiving Captain Ross's warning. What kind of point are we talking about making, Doctor? That depends on what message we want to send. Chang pulled up fleet deployment charts. We could disable their ability to enforce their demands and negotiate from a position of strength. We could demonstrate that their fleets are vulnerable and force them to reconsider or... He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. Or what? General Hayes prompted. Or we could show them what mercy looks like when delivered by someone who didn't have to be merciful. Chang's words hung in the air like a challenge. Their fleets will be helpless, crew members will be stranded and disabled. Ships with failing life support systems. We could destroy them all. And they know it instead. We offer rescue and assistance. We save the lives of beings who came to conquer us. The elegance of it struck Admiral Stone immediately. It's not about proving we can destroy them. It's about proving we choose not to. That's a much more powerful message. President Santos nodded slowly. A demonstration that our greatest weapon isn't our technology. It's our restraint. But can we actually pull this off? The logistics alone are already in motion, Chang admitted. I took the liberty of beginning preparations as soon as Captain Ross's intelligence reached Earth. Our civilian merchant fleet has been undergoing upgrades for months. Every cargo hauler, every passenger liner, every survey ship now has military-grade capabilities hidden beneath civilian appearances. General Hayes stared at the man. You've been militarizing our civilian fleet without authorization? I've been preparing for exactly this scenario, Chang replied calmly. And every modification is reversible once the crisis passes. But right now, the Council thinks they're facing our military assets. What they don't realize is that our civilian fleet is larger than our military one, and just as capable. Admiral Stone was already running calculations. If we position the civilian vessels correctly, we could have rescue ships at every disabled alien fleet within hours of the disruption beginning. They'd never see it coming, because they're not tracking our civilian movements as military threats. Exactly. The Council has spent months planning the perfect trap for Earth's military forces. What they haven't planned for is Earth's merchant marine conducting the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Chang's smile was predatory now. By the time their systems come back online, we'll have saved thousands of alien lives while demonstrating that we could have chosen to end them instead. President Santos felt the last of her diplomatic instincts warring with the necessity of what they were discussing. This is an act of war you realize will be attacking the entire Galactic Council. No, Madam President, Admiral Stone corrected gently. We'll be defending ourselves against an act of war. The Council has already decided to invade our worlds. The only question is whether we surrender or demonstrate why that would be a mistake. Dr. Chang nodded agreement. And we're not attacking them. We're rescuing them from the consequences of their own aggression. The historical precedent will show that Earth responded to existential threat with minimal force and maximum mercy. How long do we have to make this work? President Santos asked. Based on alien fleet movements, they'll be in final position in 28 days. General Hayes consulted her tactical displays. We need to complete all preparations and be ready to act before they can enforce their demands. Then, we'd better get started. President Santos stood, her decision made. Dr. Chang, you have unlimited resources and complete authority over the technical preparations. General Hayes, begin repositioning our assets under the cover of routine operations. Admiral Stone, coordinate with Chang on the civilian fleet modifications. As the meeting broke up and the various commanders began implementing humanity's most audacious gambit, President Santos remained behind, staring at the displays showing alien fleets moving inexorably toward human space. The Council had made one fundamental miscalculation. They assumed humanity would react like every other species they'd encountered. They were about to learn that humans had a very different definition of proportional response. The atmosphere in Harmony Station's council chamber crackled with anticipation as delegates filled their assigned seats, many arriving earlier than usual to witness what they assumed would be humanity's surrender. Ambassador Quyleth practically glowed with satisfaction as he surveyed the assembled representatives, his forearms gesturing in patterns that his species used to express triumph. Ambassador Helen Carter entered the chamber with exactly 3 minutes to spare, her diplomatic protocols timing her arrival to avoid appearing either eager or dismissive. Behind her walked Captain Ross and a small delegation of human officials, their expressions carefully neutral. The alien delegates watched them with a mixture of pity and curiosity. How would the youngest species handle their inevitable defeat? What none of them noticed was the nearly invisible communication device Helen wore, disguised as a simple diplomatic pin. The device connected her directly to Earth Command, where President Santos and the Terran Defense Council monitored every word and gesture. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or became a footnote in galactic history. The emergency session of the Galactic Council is now in order. The session moderator's voice echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Carter of the United Earth Government, you have requested time to address the Assembly regarding the weapons reduction protocol. Helen rose gracefully, her movements betraying none of the tension she felt. The mathematics were simple. In less than 18 hours, alien fleets would be in final position around every human world. The time for diplomacy was over. Now came the moment for truth. Honored delegates. Helen's voice carried clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. 29 days ago, this council presented humanity with an ultimatum disguised as a request. The terms were simple. Surrender 90% of our defensive capabilities except permanent occupation of our worlds, and submit to complete oversight of our technological development. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. When stated so bluntly, the protocol sounded rather harsh. Helen continued before anyone could interrupt. Today, I bring the formal response of the United Earth Government to this council. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the assembled aliens. The United Earth Government rejects the weapons reduction protocol in its entirety. The chamber erupted in surprised. Chatter Ambassador Quyleth rose from his seat, his forearms waving in agitation. Ambassador Carter, surely you understand the implications of such a decision. Your species cannot hope to resist the combined will of the galactic community. Helen smiled, and something in that smile made several nearby delegates lean back instinctively. Ambassador Quyleth, before we discuss resistance, perhaps we should address the more fundamental issue at hand, she gestured, and Captain Ross activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The display showed fleet movements, communication intercepts, and coordination timelines stretching back 8 months. Every secret meeting, every coordinated deployment, every carefully planned step of the Council's campaign against humanity was laid bare in excruciating detail. Article 23 of the Galactic Charter grants any member species the right of proportional response to existential threats. Helen's voice cut through the shocked silence. I formally invoke that article on behalf of humanity. Ambassador Quyleth's blue skin paled noticeably. What threats could humanity possibly claim to face? The protocol is a peacekeeping measure designed to To coordinate the military conquest of human space under the guise of diplomatic necessity, Helen interrupted, her tone remaining diplomatically pleasant. The evidence shows 8 months of secret negotiations, coordinated fleet movements, and preliminary votes that deliberately excluded human participation. This council has spent almost a year planning what can only be described as an invasion. The display shifted to show current alien fleet positions, their formations clearly designed for simultaneous assault rather than peacekeeping. Admiral Stone's tactical analysis highlighted weak points, supply lines, and command structures with ruthless precision. Furthermore, Helen continued, intelligence indicates that several council species have been deliberately provoking pirate attacks on human cargo vessels to justify your concerns about our defensive preparations. New data flowed across the display, showing payment records and communication logs between council member governments and the very pirate organizations they claimed to oppose. The chamber fell completely silent. Several alien delegates were staring at their own species' data with expressions of shock. Apparently, not all council members had been informed about the more underhanded aspects of the campaign. The systematic deception, the coordinated military positioning, the deliberately misleading presentation of our defensive actions as aggression, all of this constitutes a clear existential threat to humanity, as defined by Council Charter. Helen's voice remained calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute conviction. Therefore, under Article 23, Earth exercises its right to respond proportionally to the threat level we face. Ambassador Quilleth was scrambling now, his careful plans unraveling in real time. Ambassador Carter, even if your allegations were true, humanity lacks the military capacity for any meaningful resistance. The mathematics are quite clear. You are outnumbered by orders of magnitude. Helen's smile widened slightly. Ambassador Quilleth, you made one fundamental error in your calculations. You assumed that our response would be conventional. She glanced at her chronometer. At precisely 1400 Council Standard Time, which is in exactly 6 minutes, you will receive a demonstration of why the Galactic Council's attempt to disarm humanity represents the gravest miscalculation in recorded galactic history. The alien delegates began exchanging worried glances. The confidence that had filled the chamber was rapidly evaporating, replaced by something approaching fear. How could a single species speak so boldly when facing the combined might of 1,000 worlds? Captain Ross stepped forward, his military bearing unmistakable despite his diplomatic role. Delegates of the Council, for 15 years humanity has been a loyal member of this body. We have contributed to peacekeeping efforts, provided aid during natural disasters, and shared our knowledge freely with all who asked. His voice carried the authority of 4 decades in military service. In return, you have chosen to reward our cooperation with betrayal and attempted conquest. This is exactly the kind of aggressive rhetoric that justified the protocol in the first place, Quilleth protested, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, Ambassador, Helen replied quietly. This is what honesty sounds like when delivered by a species that has been systematically deceived by those they trusted. She checked her chronometer again. 4 minutes. Delegates. In 4 minutes, you will understand why attempting to disarm humanity was never about our weapons. It was about our restraint. The tension in the chamber was now palpable. Several alien delegates were attempting to contact their fleets, but Helen noticed with satisfaction that their communications were experiencing mysterious interference. Dr. Chang's preliminary operations were already beginning. You wanted to see our weapons. Council, Helen continued, her voice carrying a note of genuine sadness. You wanted to know what made us so dangerous that you felt compelled to unite against us for the first time in your recorded history. Very well. At precisely 1400 hours, you will have your demonstration. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle over the assembly. But I want you to remember, when this demonstration concludes, that every choice in the next 30 hours was yours. The aggression was yours, the deception was yours, the threat to civilian populations was yours. Her voice grew cold. What happens next is simply our response to the situation you created. Ambassador Carter, what are you talking about? The question came from Ambassador Reed of the Centauri Collective, one of the few species that had maintained neutrality throughout the conspiracy. What demonstration? Helen looked directly at Reed, and for a moment her diplomatic mask slipped, revealing something that made the alien delegate instinctively step back. Ambassador Reed, your people have always been honest in their dealings with humanity. Therefore, when our demonstration begins, I suggest you instruct your fleets to accept assistance from any human vessels that approach your crew's lives. May depend on it. The chronometer on her wrist chimed softly. 1400 hours, Council Standard Time. Delegates of the Galactic Council. Helen's voice carried clearly through the now silent chamber. The demonstration begins now. Throughout the galaxy, quantum crystalline matrices that had powered alien civilization for millennia suddenly fell silent. Navigation systems failed. Communications networks died. Life support systems switched to backup power as the fundamental technology underlying galactic civilization simply stopped working. In the council chamber, emergency lighting activated as Harmony Station's primary systems failed. Alien delegates stared in shock at their personal devices, their translation implants, their environmental suits. All dead, all useless, Captain. Ross's military implants continued functioning perfectly, as did Helen's communication device. Ladies and gentlemen, Helen's voice was now the only clear sound in the chamber as translation systems failed. Welcome to humanity's proportional response. The age of human deference to the Galactic Council had just ended, replaced by something the aliens had never encountered before. A species that could destroy them completely but had chosen mercy instead. The demonstration was only beginning. The silence across the galaxy was deafening. Admiral Lisa Stone stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching her. Tactical displays track hundreds of alien vessels as they drifted helplessly through space, their quantum crystalline power systems dead. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across control stations that moments before had hummed with the activity of coordinated invasion fleets. Admiral, we're receiving automated distress signals from 17 different species, her communications officer reported, his voice tight with barely controlled amazement. Hull breaches on 3 Altarian destroyers, life support failure on a Helix command ship, and complete navigation loss on at least 40 vessels in the Kepler sector alone. Stone nodded grimly. This was the part of Dr. Chang's plan that had kept her awake for weeks. The knowledge that alien crews would be dying while human ships remained. Perfectly operational. The moral weight of it pressed against her chest like a physical force. Begin rescue operations immediately. All vessels are to prioritize life support emergencies and hull breaches. Treat every alien crew member as if they were human throughout human space. The carefully positioned elements of Earth's merchant marine dropped their civilian disguises. The cargo hauler Spirit of Mumbai revealed military-grade medical facilities as her crew rushed to assist a disabled Centauri cruiser. The passenger liner New Tokyo Express extended emergency docking tubes to evacuate crew members from a failing Altarian battleship that had been positioned to bombard Earth's lunar colonies. Captain Robert Hayes commanded the mining vessel Prospector's Dream, which had been conducting routine asteroid surveys in the outer system until 20 minutes ago. Now his ship was the lifeline for 63 alien crew members whose destroyer had lost all power while preparing to enforce humanity's surrender. Medical team to Docking Bay 3, he announced over the ship's comm system. We've got Helix personnel with atmospheric poisoning. Their backup life support uses a different gas mixture than their primary systems. The irony wasn't lost on him that his crew was saving the lives of beings who had come to conquer Earth. The alien commander, a 7-foot insectoid named Krath, could barely speak through his translator as Hayes personally helped him to the medical bay. Why? Was all the alien could manage. Why save us when you could simply watch us die? Hayes paused in his assistance, considering his words carefully. Because that's what humans do, he said finally. We save people. It's who we are, not what we calculate to be advantageous. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of star systems. Human vessels that the Council had dismissed as harmless civilian traffic revealed themselves as the largest rescue fleet in galactic history. Ships that appeared on alien sensors as simple cargo haulers deployed advanced medical facilities. Ships registered as passenger transports extended emergency life support to disabled warships that outgunned them by orders of magnitude on Harmony Station. Ambassador Helen Carter stood calmly in the emergency-lit council chamber as alien delegates struggled with personal devices that refused to function. Their translation implants were dead, their environmental suits had switched to battery power, and their communication links to their home governments had gone completely silent. "I know you cannot understand me without your translation systems." Helen spoke clearly into the silence, "So Captain Ross will provide manual translation for those who need it. The demonstration you are witnessing is temporary. Your technologies will begin returning to normal operation within 30 hours. However, the lesson should be permanent." Captain Ross, whose enhanced implants included multilingual capabilities, began translating Helen's words into the dozen most common alien languages. His voice carried the weight of military authority as he rendered her diplomatic phrases into terms the aliens could comprehend 29 days ago. "You demanded that humanity surrender its defensive capabilities," Helen continued. "You justified this demand by claiming our weapons made us a threat to galactic peace. What you failed to understand is that our greatest weapon was never our technology. It was our choice not to use it." Through the chamber's emergency communication system, reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. Human rescue vessels were responding to distress calls faster than seemed possible. Ships that had been considered civilian traffic were deploying military-grade medical facilities and emergency equipment. The scale of the operation was staggering Ambassador Quileth. His iridescent skin, now pale with shock and something approaching terror, managed to activate a personal backup communicator. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Your civilian vessels shouldn't have these capabilities. You're violating dozens of Council regulations about military equipment on non-combat ships." Helen smiled, and the expression held no warmth whatsoever. "Ambassador, we have violated nothing. Every modification to our civilian fleet was submitted to and approved by Council safety committees. Your own inspectors certified our enhanced emergency response capabilities as being in full compliance with galactic safety standards." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "What you approved as safety equipment, we designed as rescue capabilities for exactly this scenario." The reports continued streaming in through emergency channels. Human ships were not only rescuing alien crews from disabled vessels, they were doing it with an efficiency that suggested months of planning and preparation. The Shanghai Commerce deployed emergency habitats to house evacuated personnel. The Lagos Trader began towing disabled military vessels to safe harbors. The Stockholm Medical was performing surgery on alien species, using techniques that shouldn't have existed in human databases. "How long have you been planning this?" The question came from Ambassador Reed of the Centauri Collective, whose translation implant was one of the few still functioning. "How long have you known about our intentions?" Captain Ross translated the question for Helen, who considered her response carefully. "Ambassador Reed, your people maintained neutrality throughout this conspiracy, so I will give you an honest answer. We have been monitoring unusual fleet movements and diplomatic activities for 8 months. Dr. Chang began developing countermeasures 3 years ago, when our intelligence services first detected coordinated surveillance of human activities." She gestured to the dead displays around them. "What you are experiencing is 3 years of preparation meeting 8 months of confirmed intelligence. The selective disruption of quantum crystalline systems required us to understand your technology better than you understand it yourselves." Through the emergency channels, more reports arrived. Admiral Stone's rescue fleet had reached the main alien staging areas. Human medical ships were treating wounded alien crew members with advanced techniques that surpassed even Council medical capabilities. The destroyer Resolution was sharing her food synthesizers with a disabled alien fleet whose emergency rations had failed. "The truly remarkable thing," Helen continued, her voice carrying a note of genuine sadness, "is that none of this should have been necessary. We were allies. We were partners. Your civilizations gained access to human innovation and creativity, while we benefited from your accumulated knowledge and experience. It should have been a relationship that lasted millennia. Ambassador Quileth finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse with shock. What do you want? What are your terms for ending this demonstration? Helen looked at him with something approaching pity. Ambassador, you still don't understand. The demonstration will end in 30 hours, when your systems automatically restore themselves. We aren't holding your technology hostage. We're showing you what mercy looks like when delivered by a species that doesn't have to be merciful. The communications system crackled with another update from Admiral Stone's fleet. The rescue operations were now coordinated across 17 sectors. Human ships were not only saving alien lives but sharing food, medical supplies, and even entertainment systems with crews whose vessels had been reduced to emergency power. Every alien crew member we rescued today came to conquer our worlds, Helen said quietly. Every life we save belongs to someone who voted to enslave our species. Yet here we are risking our own personnel to ensure your people survive their failed invasion. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. That, gentlemen, is humanity's greatest weapon, the ability to choose, compassion even when surrounded by enemies. Captain Ross was receiving tactical updates through his enhanced systems. The alien fleets weren't just disabled, they were completely dependent on human assistance for survival, and instead of exploiting that dependence, humanity was demonstrating exactly why attempting to conquer them had been a catastrophic miscalculation. The Council had come to disarm a species they feared might become dangerous. Instead, they had discovered a species that was already more powerful than they could imagine, and had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors. The demonstration was proving that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons, but in their wisdom about when not to use them. The great amphitheater of Harmony Station had been completely rebuilt in the 36 hours since quantum crystalline systems across the galaxy had mysteriously returned to normal operation new. Holographic displays showed a fundamentally different political landscape than the one that had existed before humanity's demonstration. The seating arrangements alone told the story. The human delegation no longer occupied the junior members section in the rear. Ambassador Helen Carter approached the central podium with measured steps, her diplomatic credentials now carrying weight that hadn't existed a week ago. Behind her, the rescued alien crews who had volunteered to attend filled an entire gallery section. Their presence served as living testimony to what had transpired during humanity's 30-hour demonstration of restraint. President Maria Santos watched from Earth Command as her ambassador prepared to address a galaxy that would never again make the mistake of underestimating human capability. The quantum crystalline disruption had been temporary, exactly as promised, but the shift in galactic power dynamics was permanent. Delegates of the Galactic Council, Helen's voice carried clearly through the chamber's restored acoustic systems. 36 hours ago, many of you believed you were witnessing the end of human independence today. You are witnessing the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. The assembled aliens listened with an attention that bordered on reverence. Gone was the casual dismissal that had characterized their previous interactions with Earth's representatives. In its place was something approaching awe mixed with a healthy dose of caution. The events of the past week have been called many things by your historians and political analysts. Helen continued. Some have termed it the 30-hour war, though no weapons were fired and no lives were intentionally lost. Others prefer the Great Demonstration or the Silent Revolution. But I believe the most accurate description is simpler. It was a teaching moment. Ambassador Quileth, his earlier arrogance completely absent, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The blue skin that had glowed with confidence during his ultimatum now seemed pale and fragile. He had spent the last day reviewing reports from the rescue operations, each one driving home the magnitude of his miscalculation. What you witnessed was not an attack. Helen's words carried to every corner of the chamber. It was an answer. The Galactic Council asked what made humanity dangerous enough to require coordinated military action against us. We showed you. The answer was never our weapons or our military capabilities. The answer was our refusal to use those capabilities except as instruments of mercy. On the gallery level, Commander Krath of the disabled Helix destroyer slowly rose to his feet. His insectoid features made emotions difficult for other species to read, but his body language spoke of profound respect. Ambassador Carter, my crew owes their lives to humans we had come to conquer. Your people risked their own safety to save beings who would have enslaved your worlds. How do we reconcile such contradiction? Helen smiled, and this time the expression held genuine warmth. Commander Krath, there is no contradiction. Every species faces moments when they must choose between their fears and their principles. Humanity chose principles. Your crew's survival is proof that the right choice can transcend even the worst circumstances. The chamber stirred as more rescued alien personnel began rising to their feet. The sight of former invasion forces showing respect to their rescuers created a powerful visual that holographic recorders transmitted across the galaxy. The weapons reduction protocol has been withdrawn, Helen announced, though everyone in the chamber already knew. But withdrawal is insufficient. The Council's attempt to disarm humanity revealed fundamental flaws in our galactic political structure. No member species should face coordinated military action based on fear rather than evidence. No alliance should be formed in secret against other Council members. No vote should exclude those it targets. Dr. Michael Chang observed from Earth's monitoring station as his technological demonstration transformed into something much more profound. The quantum crystalline disruption had lasted exactly 30 hours, but its political effects would reshape galactic civilization for centuries. Therefore, Helen continued, Earth proposes the establishment of the Mutual Defense Compact to replace the current ad hoc security arrangements. The compact will be based on 3 fundamental principles: transparency, in all security-related activities proportional response to actual rather than perceived threats, and the absolute commitment to preservation of life above all other considerations. Ambassador Reed of the Centauri Collective was the first to speak. Ambassador Carter, such an arrangement would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for millennia. How can we possibly achieve such unity of purpose? The same way we achieved it during the rescue operations, Helen replied. By focusing on what unites us rather than what divides us. Every species in this chamber shares the same basic needs: security, prosperity, and the right to develop according to their own values. Humanity's demonstration proved that these needs are not incompatible with helping others achieve the same goals. Admiral Lisa Stone reviewed the tactical displays from her command center, noting how former invasion fleets were now requesting permission to participate in joint training exercises with human rescue vessels. The shift from adversaries to partners had occurred with startling speed once the aliens realized humanity's true capabilities. The compact will include provisions for shared technology development, coordinated response to genuine threats, and mandatory mediation before any military action against member species, Helen explained. Most importantly, it will establish the principle that a species' strength is measured not by their ability to destroy, but by their commitment to protect. The voting process took less than an hour. The Mutual Defense Compact passed with unanimous support, including enthusiastic endorsement from species that had been preparing to invade human space just days before. The reversal seemed impossible, but the rescued alien crews in the gallery understood what their governments were only beginning to grasp. Humanity had redefined the very concept of power as delegates filed out of the chamber. Many approached the human delegation with requests that would have seemed impossible before the demonstration trade agreements, technology sharing proposals, and requests for assistance with humanitarian crises flooded Earth's diplomatic channels. Species that had viewed humans as dangerous upstarts now competed for partnership opportunities. Ambassador Quileth was among the last to approach Helen, his forearms making gestures of deep respect that his species reserved for their greatest heroes. Ambassador Carter, my government has instructed me to request a private meeting with Earth's leadership. We wish to discuss reparations for our role in the conspiracy against your people. Helen considered the request carefully. Ambassador Quileth, reparations assume that harm was done. Earth lost no lives and suffered no material damage during your demonstration of galactic unity against us. Instead, let us discuss how the Altarian Federation can contribute to the Compact's humanitarian missions. The subtle redefinition of the situation from crime requiring punishment to opportunity for cooperation exemplified humanity's approach to the new galactic order. Rather than seek revenge against those who had threatened them, humans were building systems to prevent such conflicts from arising again. Later, in the private chambers reserved for diplomatic communication, Helen established secure contact with President Santos and the Terran Defense Council. The success exceeded even their most optimistic projections, Madam President, Helen reported. The immediate crisis is resolved, but we're facing a different challenge now. Half the galaxy wants to join humanity in whatever we're doing next. The other half wants to hire us to solve their problems. Our demonstration was perhaps too effective. President Santos smiled at the irony. Ambassador, 3 days ago we were facing extinction. Today we're being asked to lead a galactic alliance. I suppose there are worse problems to have. Dr. Chang, monitoring from his laboratory, was already working on the next phase of human development. The quantum crystalline disruption had been a one-time demonstration, but the principles behind it were opening entirely new fields of research. Humanity's greatest advantage had always been their ability to innovate, and that advantage was now amplified by willing partners. Throughout the galaxy, the final historical record would note that humanity's answer to the Galactic Council's attempt at disarmament had indeed left them silent. Not with defeat, but with the profound recognition that they had encountered something unprecedented in galactic civilization, a species that possessed ultimate power and chose to use it in service of others. The age of human isolation was over, replaced by an era of human leadership that none of them had sought but all of them had earned. The Council had tried to disarm humanity and discovered that their greatest weapon could never be taken away: the wisdom to know when not to fight. In the end, Earth's answer hadn't just saved humanity, it had saved the galaxy from its own fear.